Welcome to the Victory Monday version of the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Ging. Today, I'm going to be talking about the recap of Atlanta Week 1. Obviously, as I mentioned, this is Victory Monday, so we did get the W. It wasn't pretty. There was a lot to unpack there. And I'm going to start by saying that I made 3 predictions prior to the game. Prediction 1, Justin Fields is going to start. That obviously came true. I don't think that was a hot take by any means. Pretty much everyone, I think, expected Justin to start. We saw Russ come out, do some warm-ups, try to give it a go, and it wasn't going to happen. So Justin Fields does get the call week 1, not exactly how we drew it up going into the season. Tomlin named Russell Wilson the starter, and then obviously the hamstring tightens back up. The calf tightens back up, and we're right back to square one with Justin Fields playing. The second prediction that I made was that the defense was going to be dominant. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the defense before I get back to Justin Fields, right after I go through my third thing here. My third thing was the Steelers were going to win 16-13. I wasn't right on the score, but I was pretty close. It was 18-10. So you had a feeling it was going to be a low-scoring game. Had a better feeling it was going to be a low-scoring game once Justin Fields was named the starter. And I actually had called this a game that I expected us to lose when Russell Wilson was starting. And I'll explain that in a minute. First, I want to get to this defense. So I've been talking all along about how I think this defense can not only be one of the top defenses in the league, but I think they could be an elite defense. Very similar to what we saw Cleveland do last year. I think this pass rush is going to be incredible all season long. Atlanta was a great test for this defense. Now, I know Kirk Cousins coming back from the injury. We didn't know what we were going to get with him. Was he going to be that mobile? They had him out of the pistol set an awful lot. So that tells me that they weren't comfortable with his mobility. So let's take that into consideration. But this Atlanta offensive line is a really good offensive line. A really good offensive line. And this defense absolutely torched them. TJ Watt specifically torched them. He's making a case for Defense Player of the Year week 1. Obviously, we saw the strip sack was a horrible call. The official called him offsides. During halftime, he admitted to TJ that he blew the call after going back and rewatching it. That was a pivotal moment in the game because honestly, that next play was a touchdown. Could have been game-changing. So really, TJ Watt should have had another sack and a strip sack at that with a fumble recovery on top of everything else. I thought that was something that was a key. And you just saw him all night beating up on, it didn't matter what they did to him. It wasn't going to be in the cards. You were never going to get TJ Watt shut down. Raheem Morris made a huge mistake by saying they weren't going to let TJ Watt affect this game. I think that just motivates TJ more to wreck it. So that was quite the rookie coaching mistake as a first-year coach in Atlanta this year. Don't piss off the guys who are all-world players. That's just a bad idea. I think not only TJ, but we saw some interior pass rush coming from Benton. We saw a little bit from Cam Hayward. Larry O looked okay. Highsmith was doing his thing as per usual. Herbig got some pressures, didn't get a sack. The inside linebackers were a little bit more quiet than what I was expecting. I really expected more out of the middle linebacker group, so that's something to keep an eye on. One of the deficiencies that I think a lot of people thought going into the season was going to be the back end of the secondary outside of Joey Porter Jr. and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Deshaun Elliott answered a lot of questions yesterday. He was really good in coverage. Obviously got the interception. Dante Jackson gets an interception. And really, the pass rush is the great equalizer when you worry about a secondary, because the more they can get home and the more they can rush the quarterback, make him make quick decisions that he's not ready to make, it causes turnovers. And that's exactly what we saw yesterday. So the defense gets 3 different turnovers in the game. The run game really never got going for Atlanta. I mean, Bijan Robinson was going to be the featured guy. He averaged 3.8 yards a carry. So it wasn't like he had a bad game. Actually, had a really good receiving game. But they couldn't run the ball consistently against this defense. So you saw them starting to check into some quick pass game, some screen game, things like that, to try to get this pass rush slowed down, first of all, but also just trying to get Bijan in open space where he has some room to work. And I think that's what we saw, where he was having a little bit of success, is getting him out in the open areas. And he's obviously a dangerous guy. So he was the only guy that really had a decent game for Atlanta, though. Kirk Cousins was horrible. He couldn't do anything. He had no time to throw the football. Obviously, the 2 interceptions. He did not look like a guy you paid big money to bring in. So I don't know how much of that, again, is based off of the injury. I don't know how much of that was just that TJ Watt was determined to prove Coach Morris wrong. But you could see clearly Kirk was uncomfortable back there all game long, which by default then takes Drake London and Kyle Pitts out of it. Now, Pitts had the touchdown. It was a blown coverage. Looked like Beanie Bishop should have been dropping deeper because he didn't have any help over top. He didn't. That's one of those early rookie mistakes you're going to see from an undrafted free agent. Again, that play should have never happened, though. So it is what it is. They score on that one. It was really, one of the few catches Pitts had, and the only thing he really did that was anything decent at all. So you neutralized him pretty well, which was going to be key number 2, depending on how you view Drake London. Joey Porter Jr. locked up Drake London, too. So, you didn't see him making any plays in this game. It was just an offense that couldn't get moving. The defense controlled the game. They were getting off the field. They were creating havoc. The defense was exactly as dominant as I was hoping to see. So I love what I saw there. You got to think this kind of performance carries on through a season, because, again, a lot of people look at Atlanta as their last year's record, but this was a very, very good offensive line, young players at skill positions that have a lot of talent, and a quarterback who has been consistently in the top 15 every year of his career. And he looked like a guy who just was in the bottom half of the league and just was not good. So I was very happy with the performance we saw to the defense. You can't ask for anything more than that. Now I'm going to go back to Justin Fields for a second. Russell Wilson obviously was the one that was supposed to be the starter in this game. The calf tightness comes back up. Justin's going to be the starter. And here's why I felt like my prediction flipped. I thought the offensive line was going to struggle with Russ. Russ's mobility wasn't going to be strong anyway. The calf tightness or not, he's just not the player he once was with his mobility. He's still mobile. But I felt like the way we'd seen the offensive line playing in the preseason, and I thought that the fact that Russ is not an elite athlete now at this point in his career, that it was going to cause a lot of issues for our offense. You knew you weren't going to get real designed run plays. Typically, if Russ is moving, it's to find throwing lanes. So I expected them to do some of the similar things that Justin did in the passing game, moving him outside the pocket with the not necessarily RPO, but I guess some rollout plays, and some play action plays. Like, I expected a lot of that stuff. But the true RPO play, I did not expect. And I thought that's when we heard Justin was going to start, and he adds that rushing from the quarterback position, that element that a defense has to look out for. That's when I really felt like we were going to win the game. I knew it was going to be low scoring, but I felt like we were going to control the clock one way or another. And it was really simply a matter of just Justin not turning the ball over. And he didn't. So when we get back to Justin Fields, they started very slow. It was a rocky, very, very rocky start. I mean, in his first series, he had a fumbled snap. He threw a ball behind George Pickens. He threw another ball late behind a guy. It was really, really rough. There's no mistaking that. That was bad. Second series wasn't a ton better. Didn't have any center quarterback exchange issues, but he was, again, he's not on target. The offense wasn't getting going. You could tell they were loading up to try to stop the run and make Justin win this game. As the game progressed, though, I thought you saw Arthur Smith, who I think had a very underrated game. There's going to be a lot of people making an argument that he was underwhelming. I think he had an underrated game as a play caller, because you could tell he was working with Justin to see what Justin was comfortable with, and he was adjusting on the fly, which is something we haven't seen in Pittsburgh for quite a while. I actually saw an article from Mark Cabali talking about that, and I thought he was spot on. He really changed it up when the center quarterback exchange thing happened. An issue, you saw a little bit more out of the pistol set. You saw a little bit more out of the shotgun set. He started getting some more designed runs in there for Justin, letting Justin use his legs and his athleticism. You saw him roll the pocket out, running tight ends across the field like when they did with Pat Freiermuth. Just brought him from the right side clear across the left. All he had to do was beat one guy because the rest of the motion was all crashing to the right with the offensive line, the running backs. So you get that play action rollout, hit Freiermuth in the flat. You saw some easy passes that Arthur was drawing up for Justin, and that's what built his confidence up. Then you saw him start taking shots. You saw the George Pickens play, which, I'm sorry, that was the ticky-tackiest goddamn call I've ever seen in my life for offensive pass interference. That should have been a 36-yard play that gets us into the scoring position. We would have been right down inside the red zone at that point. That would have been a great play to have. And honestly, if you're looking at that, if that play is not called, Justin's over 200 yards passing. George is well over 100 yards receiving, and maybe we put another, score on the board instead of a field goal. This game looks a lot different. That's not the way it happened. That's not the way it was called on the field. But when I'm looking at the performance of Justin Fields, I'm taking that into consideration because that was a really well-thrown ball. The other deep ball he threw to George Pickens in the second half, where George kind of does that sliding catch. The corner was trying to take outside away from George. George works on the inside of the corner. Justin throws the ball towards the middle, more towards the middle of the field to get George away from that corner and gives him and only him a chance at that ball. And of course, George does what he does. He makes a great play. That was another well-thrown ball. And that is a part of Justin's game that's underrated. His deep throwing. He is a pretty good deep ball thrower. And that's something that I think if he starts again against Denver, you're going to continue to see them work more into this offense. The play that shocked me out of Justin was, again, we roll the pocket out to the left, but he throws clear back across the field to George Pickens right there before the half. That is an extraordinarily difficult throw, and there's not a lot of guys in this league that are willing to try that throw. Not only that, but there's not a lot of play callers that are going to call that play because it's just so dangerous. And we talk about Justin being a guy who is turnover risk type of a player. Arthur Smith said, no, we're going to go get points right here. I'm going to call this play that the defense is not going to be ready for, and I'm going to trust this young guy with a good arm to make the throw, and that's exactly what happened. Now, George, I'd like to see you just run straight out of bounds there, because if he didn't step out of bounds and he didn't get away from a guy to get back out of bounds, he very easily could have been tackled in bounds and cost us 3 points at the half. I get it. He's trying to make a play, but situational awareness, that's part of where you're wide receiver one. You have to know that. So I'd like to see that improve next time he's in a crunch time situation at the end of a half or at the end of a game where you just simply step out of bounds and give us another chance to, in that case, there was only 30 seconds left. You're going to kick the field goal, but if there's 8 or 9 seconds left, you may take another shot. So it's a risk reward that just wasn't a high likelihood for Pickens to do anything with. Step out of bounds. Let's get the ball back and see what we can do with it. So Would have liked to see that better, but the throw, again, man, that throw was on the money. It's a very challenging, very difficult throw, and you can see the talent that Justin Fields has when he makes that kind of a play. So we saw some of that. He went over 50 yards rushing in the game. He didn't have any of the big, wild, like big, long runs that we've seen from him in the past, but he was just very consistent at picking up 4, 5, 6, 8 yards. So adding that dynamic to the offense, I think really gave Atlanta a lot of fits, and they didn't know what to do with it. So it was a very successful day for Justin Fields. I thought George Pickens played well. He's definitely a number one receiver. AJ Terrell was not an easy matchup. He's a guy that was locked up on George a lot of the game, and I thought George won a lot of them. I mean, to be fair, we said Colin and I specifically talk about George. He's very high on George. He gave him a huge goal for the season for a guy stepping into a number one role. Um, he don't look to be far off right now. He does not. Colin looks like he's on the money. George looks like a number one receiver. AJ Terrell's a very good corner in this league, and George was getting the better of him pretty much all game. So yeah, we designed up a couple plays to get him some easy ones, but I mean, he was beating him on out routes. He was beating him downfield. Um, he did a great job. I don't think you can argue with anything George Pickens did in this game. The run game didn't get going quite the way that I think we would have liked to have seen. The push from the offensive line wasn't very good in the run game. They had some moments where they did well, but it wasn't consistent. And I think that really shot a lot of drives, put us into some third and long situations where Justin was having to use his legs more. And just overall, it wasn't a good offensive day. There's no way to sugarcoat that. They didn't have a great day. No other receiver did anything. I mean, Calvin Austin, he really didn't show up. Van Jefferson doesn't show up. Why we ran a screen pass to Van Jefferson with Calvin Austin out in front of him, that was dumbfounding to me, because you've got 142 pounds soaking wet out there trying to block a corner who's about 180 pounds, and he just got thrown straight into Van Jefferson. George Pickens, if I'm going to nitpick him, that was not a block, dude. You don't just throw a shoulder into an all-pro safety and think that you're going to slow him down or stop him. I mean, Jesse Bates ran straight through him. George tried to throw a shoulder into him, like, kind of like he'll try to knock over cornerbacks. Jesse Bates ain't the one. You ain't doing that to him. He ran straight through George. If Calvin Austin did hold his block, it wouldn't have mattered because Jesse Bates was going to make the play. Absolutely horrible blocking on that by both guys. Quite embarrassing, honestly, from both guys, in my opinion. And I thought that you saw, hopefully we learn a lesson that, well, those two guys ain't the guys to be out there out in front blocking again. So a little surprised that the screen wasn't called for George Pickens. The longer, more athletic guy, I think he would have gave you a better chance to get the first down, or even calling it for Calvin Austin, who's the smaller, shifty guy who in space maybe makes a guy miss. So it was a little confusing the way it was drawn up, but I don't think the play was bad. It just was the wrong personnel was just the problem. So, I mean, those quick screens for the wide receiver screens, it's really an extension of the run. So I didn't really have a problem with the play call. Like I said, I just, the personnel out there was just not the right personnel. What else did I want to cover today? Pat Freiermuth, okay game. I mean, nothing spectacular. Had a couple catches, short yardage, no yak. Didn't notice him being horrible in the blocking game at first watch. I'll say this though, it was interesting to see how much Cordero Patterson played as opposed to Jalen Warren. Must have been kind of taking it easy with the hamstring. I think they were trying to work him back in without giving him a full workload. Saw a lot of Najee Harris in this game. Patterson kind of came in as a third down back and kind of spell Najee a little bit. So think we saw a little more out of him than we expected to. Nothing great out of him either. But again, the whole run game wasn't very good. So, I mean, offensively, again, there's a lot to work on here. It just was a bad offensive game. But we win and we win ugly. Chris Boswell was phenomenal. I mean, 350-plus yard field goals, couple more from 40 out. He had a great game. Great game. Concerned that Cam Johnston's hurt. So special teams wise, I think we're going to lose our punter maybe for the season. So who are we going to bring in? I keep seeing Presley Harvin, of course, being popped up. Like, please God, don't bring a guy like Brad Wing or literally anybody else would be just fine. We don't need Presley Harvin back in. We don't need to have the boomer bust kick because he had way more busts than booms. Gunners again, these Gunners just are not very good. That could be something that ends up being an issue in the course of the season as we let this thing play out. The Gunners have to get better. The coverage wasn't great. That part scares me a bit. That part definitely scares me a bit. So I think overall, you like what you saw out of Arthur Smith. He was coaching on the fly quite a bit. We hadn't seen that with Fichter. Didn't see that with Canada. Saw a lot of that with Arthur Smith. He was obviously trying to get a feel for Justin. Justin was trying to get a feel for Art. And then they started looking like an NFL offense towards the end of the game there. So there's something to build off of there. The Pickens and Fields connection is real. I think the Pickens and anybody connection is going to be real. There's no doubt in my mind that guy's the number one. So I think there's a lot to like about where we have as building blocks. Defense looks elite again. So I hope y'all like this. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. If you agree, disagree. And I hope y'all have a wonderful Victory Monday.